Why bearing fails? Failure cause of remedies. FEW explains path pattern of interruption. Other important of points. TV to statistics practical remedies. Mm, Concept of bearings. Concept of rolling bearings. Things roll better than they side herrick the invitation of feel. Rolling friction as for less than 100 times less than sliding friction. Microscope contacts get the pivot off and not shared the off in the rollings. Constructions. Rolling bearing how to construction this rolling bearing construction for the uh, too many components and parts of components. One is the outer race, second inner race. Shoulder inner ring race, rolling element for ball bearing, outer ring of race, slide facing. Bearing dia actually is using for bearing outer dia and bore inner dia. Bearing construction too, there is a variation bearings types of one is seal, production for seal, outer ring, bearing elements, cage, inner inner ring, and sleeves. Bearing construction to three. This is the roller bearings, outer ring, inner ring, slide surface, inter ring coverage, guide ring, rolling elements. W33 lubrication groove in the hole. Variation of rolling elements. One is the ball, cylindrical rolling, spherical roller, and spherical rolling. One is needle roller bearing, taper roller bearing, rectangle. Point of line of contacts. So what type of contact in 45 degrees, another other 25 degrees. Bearing materials. What kind of this materials is this using for the material? Performance bearings materials, high wear restricts, high roller fitting strength, non-metallic, non-corrosion like OS extra. Instructor for gas carking. High dimensional stable, hot terrible high hardness of depth, high corrosion restricts, high wettability this oil, low compact semi-day in friction, good heat conductivity, good entropy points. Bearings like SKF bearings, rings, and rolling elements. Through hardening steel, the carbon chromium steel contacting the approximately 0% carbon and chromium. Through hardening steel, chromium, nickel, alloy steel, and magnified chromium alloy steel contracting for approximate metal in 0.15% carbon. SKF bearings materials 2 SA 20110 C Sir bearing steel IOS 683 17.199 using the materials ceramics like SI N4 Ultra high speed application stainless steel like X65CR14 iOS 683 for 17199. This use kind of materials using for the bearings materials. Bearings materials 3 high alloy steels like 80 MOCR V 42 by 16 for temperature for 250 degrees Celsius of SKF. This cause of hardline steel of shock suck loads. DML analysis Russian bad bearing 6.000108B central drive for BB first support easy to TV VT TV2 engine for MI8 hyper. This different C equal 1.0 CR into 1.8 semi 0.28 mines steel near equality to 4 AISC 5210. Organization Russia materials for SNKS15. This and this different of countries. What is recommended of climates and there is a climate specifications using the materials. Special fatness hard surface for HRC 58.65 for the CR bearing steel SKF. DMRL analysis Russian bearings VH 5 kg for 930 HCR 58. Perfectly around this incredible smooth very high surface finish CTLA 0.5 microcans additional improve hard resiliency diagonal stability for 150 to 200 cc. Type of loads this bearings what is the component of loads using for the especially radial loads and axial loads combined loads. There is a force a radial force for bearings axial load for the thrust this axial load for the bearing combined loads combined both the axial and radial loads will combine this using these bearings. Axial thrust loads thrust load this pictures bar spool bearing bar spool bearings man's thrust load man's weight for cause of thrust load. Radial bearings radial load is a motor transflexion for the wheels motor per pulley shaft support bearings this radial loads. Combined loads there is a radial load weight for wheels for temporary roller bearings for thrust load conservative force. There are more buses vehicles like two four-wheelers and six-wheelers load is using for the common taper roller bearings for the using. Bearing type of loads cylindrical roller bearings radial load only for heavy. The cylindrical roller bearings is C for the mini trucks and buses for using the cylindrical roller bearings. Ball bearings are both axial and radial loads for using. Taper roller bearings radial load and axial load on definition of also direction deflection also. Axial load also called as the thrust load. Second, bearings types of loads for the radial load and cylindrical roller bearings. Bearings types of loads this given these pictures deep groove ball bearing. Second one is the angular contact ball bearing self angular BB. First one, radial load for carrying for capacity. Second one, axial load carrying capacity. Speed concept, accommodate misalignment, accommodate self-aligned bearing for a rotor bearing to self contact for using for both sides. Bearing types of loads in four: axial load in the one direction, radial load, taper roller bearings. Bearing types of loads in fifth: radial loads and thrust double taper roller bearings. Bearing clearances, actually using for bearings for the different type of applications industry. There is a variation of automobiles and industrials. What is the material using for the equipments, how much temperature using for the certain machinery, this using for the specification clearance. This application designed for the four type of applications for using the now in the market. This load zone, this load zones, this see the pictures for the radial bearings for using the balls. This is 360 degrees rotation for the shaft. This ball also using for the load along with 360 degrees in the transfer the load point. Bearing clearance, this bearing clearance play using with the bearing, how much they play using the contact ball or race. This means clearance. This axial clearance you will using for the this angular, how much angle the touch into clearance for the play for the axial clearance. Clearance designation for the C1 less than C2 clearance, C2 less than normal clearance, CN normal clearance, C3 is greater than normal clearance, C4 is greater than C3 clearance, C5 greater than C4 clearance. Russian system, this explains for the A6210 C3 ball bearing as this 18 for the 18.36 microns, 0.007 tau or 0.001 radial international clearance. The axial internal clearance explained for the A5210 C3 ball bearing is a 33-35 microns. This on some standards for the ball bearing using the support sounds of 140 to 240 microns axial internal clearance. This some examples. Effect of temperature of the clearance. This see these pictures for the radial clearance for the thermal expansion. This cold is 5 to 10 degrees common side. Explosion for the ROM is temperature. When you using for the some application for the hot in like turbines, this using for the C3 bearings. This cold bearings is the normally normal temperature. Otherwise, you minus you will get temperature for the on the reason clearance less than clearance. Effect of the fit of clearance. International fit between the shaft and bearing inner race reduce the radial clearance by the approximately 80% of the fit because there is the inter ring explanation and the other ring contacts. Effect of loose fit. N is equal to 3000 for 10 hours per day, 30 days of 180 minutes for shoulder sealing the motion, escape the some life this between clearance delta is 13 micro mm for 0.00 tau. Load distribution for clearance. Load distribution the less clearance, more clearance. This less clearance depending of the ball effect on the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 affected. This more clearance depending on this only five balls in affected. Pressure between rolling element cause of can they reach for 4 lakh psi. Explode clearance loading or um, loading or reduce the truss engagement bearings record regular recordings. Alignment of the rolling elements for the disgrace. Vibration increase the high speed for noise increases running and locating access reduces. Free load, fair load. A small amount of the load before the running of the bearing cause of mm, negative clearance, especially difference of competitive truss at the contact area. This bearings required improve the vibration for high speed reduction noise reduce. Alignment of the rolling elements improve the thrust bearings. Running located the X according improves. Effect of the clearance on the bearing life. This see this picture for the life of for load for clearance. Explain the polar clause of high thrust and the heat generation. Bearing life. Repeated compose this trussless rolling first cause of affect materials elements of the failures. Basic rolling retain life. This is 90% reliability of the bearing. Total number of elevations of the each bearings.
Bearing life, repeated compressive stresses, rolling fatigue, cause flaking of material of raceways and rolling elements and hence failure. Basic rating life L10, 90% reliability of the bearing is the total number of revolutions in millions which 90% of the bearings out of the lot reach before or at which the first signs of flaking occur under identical operating conditions. Bearing life 2, L10 equals CP, NC equals design load, basic dynamic rating load, constant radial or axial load when BRG is rotating, in N that will give bearing life of 106 revs in accordance with ISO 281, 1990. P equals actual equivalent dynamic load in NN equals 3 for ball bearings, 3.33 for roller bearings. Bearing life 3. If actual load is half of the rated load, life of a ball bearing will increase by 8 times. Minimum load. If actual load increases by 25% above the rated load, the life of a ball bearing gets nearly half. Actual service life may be reduced even further below the calculated value because of factors like contamination, misalignment, improper installation or lubrication, etc. Effect of overload is more severe on roller BRG.
Effect of overload is more severe on roller BRG.
Life adjustment factor higher the expected reliability, the lesser is the bearing life L5. 95% reliability equals 0.62 L10 L3. 97% reliability equals 0.44 L10 L1. 99% reliability equals 0.21 L10.
99% reliability equals 0.21 L10.
Why bearings fail. Study in Scandinavian countries indicates
Why bearings
1/3
fail.
BRGS
Study in
fail because
Scandinavian
of poor
countries
lubrication,
indicates
1/6
1/3
BRGS fail because of contamination, 1/3 BRGS fail because of fatigue, 1/6 BRGS fail because of bad installation.
1/6 BRGS fail because of bad installation.
Why bearings fail -2 in India. There is likely to be greater percentage of failures because of colon contamination, improper installation and lubrication, lesser percentage of failures because of colon fatigue.
Lubrication, lesser percentage of failures because of colon fatigue.
Failure mode classification 1. As per ISO 15243, 2004, there are 15 main failure modes classified as fatigue, repeated compressive stresses, subsurface surface initiated, metal to metal contact, wear abrasive adhesive.
Metal to metal contact, wear abrasive adhesive.
Failure mode classification 2. Corrosion, moisture, fretting, false brinneling, electrical erosion, excess voltage, current leakage.
False brinneling, electrical erosion, excess voltage, current leakage.
Failure mode classification 3. Plastic deformation, overload,
Failure mode
indentation from debris,
classification 3.
indentation by
Plastic
handling,
deformation,
fracture,
overload, indentation
force,
from debris,
fatigue,
indentation
thermal
by
cracking.
handling, fracture, forced, fatigue, thermal cracking.
Symptoms of bearing failure: overheating, noise, vibration, obstruction of
Symptoms
movement,
bearing failure,
RDT
overheating,
reduces,
noise,
shaft
vibration,
jammed.
obstruction
Others?
of movement, RDT reduces, shaft jammed. Others?
Corrosion appearance cause action: gray black streaks across the raceways,
Corrosion
mostly
appearance cause
coinciding
action,
with the
gray black
rolling
streaks
element
across the
spacing.
raceways,
At a later
mostly
stage, pitting of
coinciding with the
raceways and
rolling
other
element
surfaces of the
spacing.
bearing,
At a later
presence of
stage,
water,
pitting of
corrosive
raceways and other
substances in the
surfaces of
bearing
the
over a
bearing,
long period of
presence of
time.
water,
Improve
corrosive
sealing.
substances in
Use
the bearing
lubricant
over a
with better
long
rust
period of
inhibiting
time.
properties.
Improve sealing. Use lubricant with better rust inhibiting properties.
Where abrasive particles appearance cause action: small indentations around the raceways and rolling elements, dull, worn surfaces, lack of cleaning before and during mounting operation, ineffective seals, lubricant contaminated by worn particles from brass cage. Do not unpack bearing until just before it is to be mounted. Keep workshop clean and use clean tools. Check and possibly improve sealing. Always use fresh clean lubricant. Wipe the grease nipples. Filter the oil.
Wipe the grease nipples. Filter the oil.